Hello, this is the sixth lecture in the Introduction to the New Testament background, history, archaeology, and today we want to focus on archaeology, and in particular, archaeology as it relates to the world in which Jesus lived. What do we have that remains there? So let us begin at the beginning with Bethlehem and the Church of the Nativity at Bethlehem. Now I should note that of these sites that we're going to be looking at, there are two types. The first type is what I would call commemorative sites. That is, you go to this site, it is probably in the right place or about the right place where something happened in the New Testament, but the simple fact is we don't have any archaeology that relates to this site. It is a place where there's a very old tradition that this thing happened in this particular area, and so often shrines have been built there or something like that, and you go there to commemorate. Other sites are properly archaeological sites. That is, we have finds on the ground from the right period, and we can talk about what we have found there. The Church of the Nativity at Bethlehem is a commemorative site. That is, we don't have any particular archaeology relating to where Jesus was born, and of course you wouldn't expect to. There is, however, an ancient village underneath the modern buildings at Bethlehem, but we haven't had much opportunity to excavate there. The Church of the Nativity is an ancient tradition. Constantine built the first version of the church. It's been rebuilt over the centuries, and it commemorates the place where Jesus was born. Here is the inside of the church, the central nave when you go inside. And then, of course, the aim of any visitor there is to go to the place where Jesus was born. The tradition has it that there's a grotto or a small cave there, and of course it's been lavishly decorated in honor of that time ever since. Now to Nazareth. Of course, Jesus grew up in Nazareth. It was a small town. Nazareth has been continuously rebuilt over the centuries, and the result is we don't have much opportunity to do archaeology. Any town that's been continuously rebuilt over the centuries, the problem is that people don't want you excavating in their basements. So for the most part, we're quite limited in what we can excavate, and we get what we get. The view here is rather important, I think, for our purposes. This is a view of Nazareth from Sepphoris. Sepphoris is about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away, and Sepphoris is important. It's not mentioned in the New Testament, but remember, Joseph was a carpenter, as it is often translated in the New Testament. The Greek is a tekton, a skilled laborer in the building trade. We're not exactly sure what he did, but given what most things are made of in that part of the world, probably he was working in stone to a large degree. In any case, it so happened that right next to Nazareth, the biggest building project of the period was Sepphoris. The Romans had destroyed the city. They decided to rebuild it. They rebuilt it on a lavish scale. It is spectacular. And therefore, it makes perfect sense that a tekton, a skilled laborer in the building trade, would be living in Nazareth. It's the nearest village. And what you are looking at then in this slide is very probably the way that Joseph walked to work in the morning, that he went to Sepphoris to participate in this rather impressive building project. And it is very possible, of course, that Jesus went with his father as he grew up and maybe even was apprenticed in the building trade. Here is an overview of Nazareth, and in the distance you see the large church of the Annunciation. It is a modern church rebuilt in the 1970s, of not great importance for us archaeologically, except when you go through the church and go out the back door. In the back of the Church of the Annunciation is a courtyard, and there is a roofed area. If you look down underneath the roofed area, you will see one of the few excavations that has taken place in Nazareth, and here's what you find. On the left in this slide, you see some structures. Toward the top of the slide, you see a house structure. You also see the remnants of an ancient oven. At the bottom right of the slide, you see a circular indentation with a slash across it. This is an ancient olive press. In this area of remains from the ancient world was discovered some first century pottery. In other words, some people, at least, at the time of Jesus, lived in this particular location in Nazareth. Most people think Nazareth was a pretty small village. We don't have many remains of it, but here's what we have. Up the hill from the Church of the Annunciation, and it's strange that it's up the hill, is another church, Greek Orthodox Church, and inside that church, you have to go inside and look down into a bit of a pit. You will see what is the slide on the right, and that is an artesian well. Artesian wells are commonly, when you dig a well, you dig a hole down in the ground and you reach down to get the water. And with an artesian well, the water comes up to you. So you dig the hole, the water has pressure on it, and the water comes out. This is an artesian well toward the top of a hill, which I can't quite understand in terms of gravity, but in any case, we have here a well that has been pouring water out for a very, very long time. Most everybody agrees that it was functioning as a well and therefore the prominent water supply for the town of Nazareth at the time of Jesus, and therefore it is affectionately called Mary's well. Because in all probability, since drawing water was typically work given to women in that period of time, Mary would have come to this well to draw water at the time of Jesus. Just to give you a sense of it, even though it's not specifically mentioned in the New Testament, here is Sepphoris. Here we have one of the main streets of Sepphoris. You can see on either side of the streets ancient columns that bordered it. You can see the beautiful paving. There are marvelous mosaics, a great marketplace area. It is a spectacular town. There was even a theater built, and maybe the early stages of the theater were built during Jesus' lifetime. In any case, this was Herod Antipas's, one of his capitals, Sepphoris and Tiberias. It's very interesting that Sepphoris and Tiberias were the nicest, most lavish cities in the Galilee region at the time of Jesus, and at least according to the New Testament, we have no evidence that he ever visited either one. This has puzzled scholars a bit. Why did Jesus not visit the nice towns in the area? Was he avoiding them for some reason? We simply don't know. Maybe he was avoiding Herod Antipas. We don't know. But in any case, this is Sepphoris. Here we get a very nice view of the Sea of Galilee with wildflowers in the foreground. We are on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee, looking south. In the distance, you can barely see the city of Tiberias, built by Herod Antipas. And farther on the far right of the screen, you see a small village area. That is the village of Migdal. Mary Magdalene, that means she's from Migdal. That is the village in that area. Later on, we'll see the so-called Jesus boat. It was discovered there on the right. This particular picture is taken at a commemorative site. The commemorative site is called the Mount of Beatitudes. Remember that in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus climbs up a mount. He gives a sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 through 7. Where did he give that Sermon on the Mount? Well, of course, climbing a hill and giving a sermon does not leave archaeological remains. There are plenty of hills around the Sea of Galilee. Which one was it? We simply don't know. And so ancient tradition had it that this was very probably the site. We don't know, but it is, I can tell you, a beautiful site to visit, a wonderful place to commemorate. When I take groups there, I take them up and we read the Sermon on the Mount with this view in the background, and it's rather a nice experience. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago the so-called Jesus boat, found right on the edge of the Sea of Galilee near the ancient village of Migdal, what we now call Ginosar. There's a big kibbutz there and a museum, kibbutz Ginosar. This boat was found in the late 1980s where there was a drought and the level of the Sea of Galilee dropped, and some kibbutzniks happened to be walking along the shores with a metal detector, and they found evidence of this buried in the mud. A hurried and harried excavation took place of an ancient wooden boat buried in mud, and the boat was the consistency of wet cardboard, and they were trying to protect it and preserve it. It was quite an extraordinary discovery and quite an extraordinary act of preservation, and in sum, they did it, and it's very nice. This is a first century boat. We have first century pottery and coins that were found inside the boat. So this is the type of boat that when Jesus traveled around on the Sea of Galilee, when Peter and Andrew went out to go fishing, this is the kind of boat that they would have ridden in. Did Jesus ride in this particular boat on the Sea of Galilee? Of course, we have no idea, but there weren't all that many boats on the Sea of Galilee. There is some possibility, at least, that he did. The construction is fascinating of this boat. There's been a lot of research done on it. It's about 24 feet long, which gives you some sense of the size. And the next picture is a reconstruction of what this boat probably looked like when it was functional.